so the real concern here is that, when eventually he's much better and, is able to get back to full health, will he come back more emboldened?
This is not only an issue or a problem of Slovakia. I think politicians also in Europe have to think about this.
Let's get the thoughts of Nina dos Santos, the international broadcaster who's former CNN Europe editor. Welcome back, Nina.
Thanks very much. Hi, John.
Hi. So Robert Fico, first of all, what do we know about his condition now?
We believe that he's in critical, serious, but stable condition. And thankfully, as of yesterday evening, it appeared, according to his deputy prime minister, an interview that he gave, that Robert Fico will probably, thankfully, survive what looks like an assassination attempt, whose motivations are still very much a subject of investigation and international consternation. The suspect appears to be a 71-year-old poet, who was in this town where Robert Fico was giving a government off-site meeting, and appears to have accosted him with a pistol and shot 5 rounds into his body.
Right. Now, politics in Slovakia is not especially stable, is it? There were protests in that country before this assassination attempt, complaints about the government planning to abolish the state broadcaster. Now there is talk among commentators of maybe deterioration in the country to the point of civil strife and even civil war. Is that a realistic threat, a warning?
I think that there's real concerns here that Robert Fico, if he's well enough to come back to office, because remember that he is also a huge political survivor in the relatively recent history of this young country that was only formed at the end of the mid-1990s, early 1990s probably is best to say, after, of course, it split from what was then Czechoslovakia following the Velvet Revolution. Robert Fico has been prime minister 4 times, and he's been very, very able to sort of capture populist anger on various different issues to push himself right to the forefront of Slovak politics, each time coming back in more and more of a divisive fashion. And so the real concern here is that, when eventually he's much better and, is able to get back to full health, will he come back more emboldened? The other big question is that Peter Pellegrini, his ally, who's also from his populist side of the aisle, he will be taking the helm next month as the new president of Slovakia, and he already has made rather sort of concerning, divisive messages about this attack being, he says, politically motivated. I would say one thing, though, that was a bit of a sigh of relief, which was when we saw Zuzana Kaputova, the outgoing president, have a statement with Peter Pellegrini, the ingoing president, and they appeared earlier this morning to have this joint statement to appeal for calm, to assuage these fears of division inside Slovakia at this extremely tense time.
Okay, now can I get your view on what's happening in the Netherlands now, where we're looking at our shifting sands? We're closer to a new right-wing government of the Netherlands now, aren't we, after the success of Geert Wilders' Freedom Party there?
Yeah, that's right. It seems amazing that it's taken 6 months to try and form this government. Geert Wilders himself had to step back from any promise of being prime minister to actually run the country, to make sure that he could actually finally lock in power after being such an important pressure figure, largely on the fringes of Dutch politics. But now he really is at the core of this government. And that is, again, coming just one day news that they've managed to form together this coalition with populist movements that, of course, and this is crucial here and will very much worry some sectors in Brussels, includes the farmers' parties. They will be able to push that sort of far-right narrative further and further as we head closer towards the European parliamentary elections. They've already unveiled their idea for an agenda. No surprise to see that it's quite anti-immigrant. It's going to put the Netherlands, a core EU member, right in confrontation with Brussels, because what this government essentially wants to do is start to repeal a number of rights that asylum seekers and immigrants to the Netherlands have automatically, to make it what sounds like is going to be a much, much more difficult environment for what was, up until Geert Wilders appeared on the scene over the last 20 years or so, a very welcoming country for immigrants inside the EU.
And as for Wilders himself, after so many years as an outsider, he is now on the inside and very powerful, though he won't be in office. He won't be part of the government, which is interesting, I think, to people looking in from outside.
Yeah, that's right. Well, this is obviously the this is obviously the compromise that he made to try and bolt together this coalition. Full disclosure here, John, I'm half Dutch, and I must say that it is the Dutch, not just the Dutch language, the pronunciation of Geert Wilders' name, but also the political environment and how you form coalition governments in the Netherlands is something that is acutely complex. We could be here all day discussing it, which is why it's taken about 6 months for them to actually form this coalition. But just going back to the issue of Geert Wilders and the kind of force that he's been on the political scene, actually, interestingly enough, since the mid-2000s, it dovetails with the political trajectory of somebody like Robert Fico, except Robert Fico in that relatively new country of Slovakia has been able to gain office many different times. Geert Wilders is more of a sort of anti-immigration pressure from the sidelines that now obviously will be in government. And a lot of his rhetoric, as I was saying before, chimes with a lot of the rhetoric that we've seen coming out of Robert Fico's successive governments over recent years. There are also parallels as well when it comes to, the really concerning prospect of violence here inside the EU, targeted at democratically elected leaders. Remember that Geert Wilders back in 2018 himself was subject to a potential death plot by somebody.
Okay, and Nina, it's not just the a wind blowing from the right in the Netherlands, or for that matter in Slovakia, where of course the Prime Minister was re-elected. It's the European Parliament, because there are polls now suggesting there could be a significant increase in the representation of the right-wing and populist parties at the European Parliament in the coming elections.
That's right. The European parliamentary elections are taking place between the 6th and 8th of June. In fact, Slovakia, in the wake of this terrible attack on the Prime Minister, has actually called for all political parties for the moment to suspend campaigning, given the divisive environment there. And many politicians across the EU will be looking at this and being extremely concerned, because essentially, up until recently, it appeared as though it was actually the centre-right bloc of all these different parties across the EU. They come together under the umbrella of what's called the European People's Party, the EPP, the centre-right bloc, which is likely to gain the biggest bloc inside the European Parliament and shift the axis further to the right. But what they have as a conundrum is that the real challenges they have are coming from the same side of the political spectrum, the right, but just quite a bit further to the right. And I was at a meeting in Bucharest, and all of these centre-right parties came together a couple of months ago to unveil Ursula von der Leyen as their candidate for a second round at the helm of the all-important European Commission. She's from the centre-right, and repeatedly you heard politicians from all corners of Europe from this bloc saying the thing we're most concerned about are those fringe elements. On the left a bit as well, but largely on the right.
All right, Nina de Santis, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for coming on this afternoon.